royal embassy stood tall in the middle of the busy city. Its walls were bright white, and its gates were polished so clean that they reflected the sunlight. Many people passed by every day, but very few noticed the guards who stood at the entrance. They looked like statues, motionless and serious, yet their presence gave the embassy a sense of power and discipline. Among these guards was Noor, a young woman who had trained for many years to serve the royal family. She was known for her sharp focus, steady hands, and strong sense of duty. She believed that every movement, every step, and every salute mattered. Noor loved her job, but she also knew that it required patience and careful attention. Standing for hours under the sun or in the rain was not easy. Some people thought the job was simple, but Noor knew it demanded discipline and respect. She had learned to control her emotions and remain calm no matter what happened around her. Today she was on her usual post, standing straight and alert, her eyes scanning the visitors coming near the gate. The morning was bright, and the streets outside were busy with cars and people walking to their offices. Suddenly a foreign officer arrived at the gate. He was tall, with sharp features and a confident look. His uniform was clean and perfectly ironed, and his presence immediately drew attention. People walking by paused for a moment, curious about this visitor. The officer approached the gate with fast, confident steps, expecting everything to follow his commands. When he saw Noor standing motionless, he frowned. It was unusual for him to see a guard so still. He stopped in front of her and raised his hand sharply. "Salute," he ordered, his voice firm and clear. Noor did not move. Her posture remained straight, her eyes steady, and her face calm. She did not flinch, not even slightly. People outside the embassy began to notice the unusual scene. Some whispered to each other, while others stopped and watched silently. They could feel the tension in the air, but Noor did not seem affected. She was trained to follow the rules of the royal embassy, and she knew that every action had a reason. The officer's expression changed from surprise to confusion. He stepped closer and repeated his order, louder this time. "I said salute," he commanded, expecting obedience. His voice echoed through the street, making passers-by stop for a moment. Noor finally spoke, her voice calm and polite. "Saluting is a gesture of respect. I salute only according to the rules of the royal embassy." The officer blinked, not expecting an answer. His frown deepened. "I am an officer in my country," he said, his voice rising slightly. "You will salute me." Noor kept her posture and looked at him directly. "I follow the orders of my superiors in the embassy," she replied. "No one else. This is my duty." The officer was momentarily silent. He looked around, noticing the crowd gathering outside the gate. Some people were recording videos on their phones, curious to see what would happen next. Others whispered words of admiration. Noor's calmness made her stand out more than her uniform or her weapons. She was small in size compared to the officer, but her confidence made her seem larger than life. At that moment, the head of security, Rashid, appeared. He had been informed of the situation and hurried to the gate. Rashid was older, with years of experience, and everyone in the embassy respected him. He stepped between Noor and the officer to prevent any misunderstanding. "Officer, please understand," Rashid said calmly. "Our guards follow strict protocol. Noor is not being disrespectful. She is following the rules of the royal house. She is doing exactly what is required." The officer raised his eyebrows, clearly confused. "But I am in uniform. I have authority." "I cannot be ignored." Rashid nodded. "Yes, you are an officer in your country, but this is the royal embassy. The rules here are different. Noor is trained to follow those rules. She is not refusing you out of disrespect. She is following her duty." The officer studied Noor carefully. He noticed her steady eyes, her calm expression, and the way she held herself perfectly straight. She was not being rude. She was professional. Slowly, the anger in his eyes began to fade, replaced by curiosity. He realized that this young guard was not afraid but disciplined. Her confidence came from knowledge and preparation, not from rebellion. Noor stood quietly, showing patience and respect. She understood that her role was important, that her duty was to protect the embassy's honor, and that she must act with integrity at all times. People outside the embassy continued to watch, feeling both tension and admiration. Noor's presence was powerful, not because of force, but because of her calm courage. The foreign officer stood at the gate, his uniform crisp, his posture rigid, and his eyes fixed on Noor. He could not understand why a young guard would refuse a simple command. His voice became sharper as he said, "I am an officer of my country. You will salute me." Noor remained calm, her expression steady, her posture perfect. "I salute only according to royal protocol," she said firmly. "That is my duty. I do not salute anyone who has not earned it under these rules." The officer's frown deepened. He had never encountered such firm resistance. In his experience, orders were followed immediately. Yet here was a guard who did not move, who did not flinch, who spoke with respect yet held her ground. He took a step closer, expecting to intimidate her, but Noor did not step back. Her gaze did not waver. People outside the embassy were now paying close attention. Some were whispering to each other, curious about the standoff. Others quietly admired Noor's courage. They could sense that this was not an ordinary scene. A single guard standing firm against authority had a strange power that drew their eyes and held their attention. The officer raised his voice again, frustration clear in his tone. "I cannot believe you are refusing my command. This is an insult." Noor's response was calm, measured, and polite. "I am not insulting you. I am following my duty. Respect is shown according to the rules here. That is why I do not salute without proper protocol. I am trained to protect the honor of this embassy and the royal family." At that moment, the head of security, Rashid, approached the gate. He walked with steady steps, his uniform neat, and his presence commanding attention. Rashid had years of experience and understood that discipline and respect were more important than anger or fear. "Officer, please listen," Rashid said in a calm and respectful voice. "Noor is not refusing you out of disrespect. She is following the rules of the royal house. She is trained to act in a precise way, and that is exactly what she is doing." The officer turned his attention to Rashid. "I am an officer. I have authority. You cannot ignore me." Rashid nodded slowly. "Yes, you have authority in your country. But here in this royal embassy, the rules are different. Noor is trained to follow those rules. Her duty is not to challenge anyone, but to protect the honor of the embassy and the royal family. She is doing her duty perfectly." The officer looked back at Noor. He studied her carefully, noticing her steady eyes, her calm face, and the way she stood so perfectly straight. She was not being rude. She was professional. He had expected defiance, anger, or fear, but all he saw was discipline and focus. His frustration began to fade, replaced by curiosity. Noor continued to stand quietly, waiting for him to understand. She did not move, but her calm presence spoke louder than words. She had learned from her training that courage was not always loud. Sometimes courage was quiet and steady. She understood that her duty was to protect the embassy and its honor, and she would not let fear or pressure change her actions. Outside, the crowd had grown slightly. People were recording the moment on their phones. Some whispered words of admiration, noting how the young guard held her ground against a confident foreign officer. Others simply watched, impressed by the courage and discipline Noor showed. The officer finally lowered his hand. He had realized something important. This young guard was not disrespectful. She was not trying to challenge him personally. She was acting according to the rules she had been trained to follow, and she was doing it with complete confidence. It was a quiet, strong courage, the kind that could not be forced or commanded. Rashid smiled slightly. "If you would like, I can escort you inside according to proper protocol. Noor will remain here on her post." The officer nodded slowly. He could feel the eyes of the crowd and the weight of the moment. He understood that Noor's actions were not rebellion, but loyalty and professionalism. He had expected compliance without question, but what he saw instead was respect and integrity. Noor relaxed her shoulders slightly, though she remained standing straight. She had not moved, had not wavered, and had not lost her calm. Her training had prepared her for this moment, and she had met it with honor. The officer stepped back and allowed the escort to guide him into the embassy. As the gates closed behind him, Noor returned to her quiet observation. She watched the people outside continue with their day, unaware of the full meaning of her actions. But inside the embassy, whispers began to spread. Staff talked about the young guard who had stood firm, who had shown that courage was more important than fear, and that discipline was stronger than authority when used correctly. Noor felt a quiet sense of satisfaction. She had not sought attention or praise. Her reward was knowing that she had done her duty, respected her training, and protected the honor of the royal family. In that moment, Noor realized something important. True courage was not loud or dramatic. After the foreign officer had been escorted into the embassy, the quiet of the gate returned. People outside continued their daily routines, but whispers of the unusual scene spread through the city. Inside the embassy, staff were talking in hushed voices about Noor, the young guard who had stood firm against a confident officer without fear. Her courage and discipline had made a strong impression on everyone who witnessed it. Noor returned her focus to her duties. She stood straight, her eyes scanning the entrance as she always did. Her heart beat steadily, not from fear but from concentration. Standing at the gate required patience, vigilance, and respect, and Noor took pride in doing it perfectly. Every visitor who approached had to be treated with attention and care. This was her responsibility, and she carried it without complaint. Meanwhile, the head of security, Rashid, walked calmly through the hallways of the embassy. He had decades of experience in security and understood the importance of balance between discipline and diplomacy. Rashid had seen many tense situations, but he knew that Noor's actions had set a new example. Her steady courage had not only defended the embassy's honor, but had also taught a lesson in professionalism to everyone present. Rashid stopped at a small office where the staff were gathered. Noor followed her duty perfectly, he said. She did not act out of fear or anger. She acted with honor, respect, and discipline. That is the behavior we expect from all guards here. A young recruit, Amir, looked up at Rashid with wide eyes. But sir, how could she remain so calm? I would have been nervous. I might have moved even if I knew it was right. Rashid smiled gently. That is the difference between training and courage. Noor has learned to control her emotions. She understands that her duty is not about fear or pride. It is about protecting the honor of the embassy and the royal family. That is why she could stand firm without hesitation. At the same time, the foreign officer had reached a meeting room inside the embassy. He still thought about Noor and her refusal to salute him. He realized that she had not acted out of disrespect. Her actions had been deliberate, thoughtful, and guided by strict rules he did not fully understand. The officer, who had been confident in his authority, now found himself reflecting on the meaning of true discipline. I have seen many guards in my career, he said quietly to his colleague, but I have never seen anyone who could remain so steady in the face of authority. She did not act out of fear or defiance. She acted out of principle and training. That is remarkable. Back at the gate, Noor noticed that the streets were returning to their normal rhythm. Cars moved steadily, and people walked past without stopping, but she remained alert. Her eyes scanned for every detail, from the smallest gesture to the slightest unusual movement. Discipline was not something she could take off when the tension passed. It was part of her, guiding every action and every thought. Later that morning, Rashid returned to the gate. He nodded at Noor. You have done well. Your training and your courage were visible to everyone today. Remember, discipline and respect are stronger than fear or pressure. Noor inclined her head slightly. Thank you, sir. I only follow the rules I have been trained to follow. Rashid smiled. And that is why you are respected. Not just by us, but by everyone who saw what happened. As the day went on, the story of Noor's courage reached other members of the embassy. Staff began to understand that bravery was not always about action or confrontation. Sometimes it was about standing quietly, remaining calm, and following the right principles. Noor had shown them that true courage was steady, respectful, and disciplined. Outside the embassy, some of the people who had witnessed the encounter were still talking. A few had recorded videos on their phones, sharing them with friends and family. Did you see that guard? One person asked. She didn't move at all, not even when the officer shouted. She was so calm. I have never seen anything like it. Inside, Noor continued her duties. She did not seek praise or attention. She understood that her role was to protect the honor of the royal family, to act with discipline, and to remain calm under pressure. That was her responsibility, and she took it seriously. By the afternoon, the embassy had returned to its normal rhythm. Visitors came and went, security checks continued, and Noor remained at her post. She moved only when necessary, her presence steady and unshakable. People began to realize that she was not just a guard. She was a symbol of discipline and honor. The foreign officer back in the meeting room could not stop thinking about Noor. Her actions had left a lasting impression. He realized that authority alone was not enough to earn respect. Discipline, courage, and respect were far more powerful. He made a mental note to remember this lesson, understanding that it could change the way he thought about leadership and respect in his own country. By the end of the day, Noor had proven something important. True courage was not loud or aggressive. It was calm, quiet, and principled. And in that quiet courage, she had earned the respect of everyone who had seen her stand firm at the gate. By the next morning, the embassy grounds were calm again, but the memory of the previous day lingered in the minds of the staff. Noor arrived early for her shift, her uniform neat and her posture perfect as always. She moved with quiet confidence, checking her weapons and equipment, and then returned to her position at the main gate. Standing there, she observed every visitor, every movement, and every sound. For Noor, vigilance was not just part of her job. It was a principle she lived by. Inside the embassy, the foreign officer had not forgotten the encounter. He had been impressed by Noor's calm and steady demeanor, and he wanted to understand more about the rules that guided her actions. When Rashid, the head of security, came to brief him on the next part of his visit, the officer asked quietly, "Tell me more about the guard at the gate. She impressed me yesterday." Rashid smiled slightly, understanding the officer's curiosity. "Noor follows the rules of the royal house strictly," he explained. "Every action she takes, every movement is guided by training and discipline. She does not act out of fear, anger, or personal opinion. She acts out of respect for the royal family and the embassy. That is why she could remain calm when you gave your order." The officer listened carefully, nodding. "I expected her to salute immediately or at least move in some way. But she stood firm. She did not disrespect me, yet she did not obey my command. That required courage, training, and understanding." Rashid nodded. "Exactly. That is the way we train our guards. We teach them that respect is earned and that rules exist to protect everyone's honor. Noor is an excellent example of what we expect from all our guards. She is disciplined, attentive, and confident in her role." Meanwhile, Noor continued her watch at the gate. The morning sun reflected off the polished embassy walls, and the streets outside were gradually filling with people and vehicles. Each visitor who approached was greeted with careful observation, but Noor did not lose her calm. A few of the regular visitors smiled politely, nodding at her as they passed. They had seen her before and knew her reputation for focus and discipline. A young student approached the gate to take a closer look at the embassy. He had heard stories about the royal guards and wanted to see one in action. Noor noticed him immediately and maintained her calm watch. She did not speak unless necessary, but her presence alone communicated discipline and authority. The student watched in silence, fascinated by her stillness and focus. Back inside, the foreign officer had begun his meeting with the embassy staff. Although the discussion was formal and focused on diplomatic matters, his mind kept returning to Noor. He realized that authority alone was not enough to earn respect. Respect came from integrity, discipline, and courage. Noor had demonstrated all of these qualities in one quiet, powerful moment at the gate. Later in the day, Rashid visited Noor at the gate to check on her. "You handled the situation yesterday very well," he said quietly. "Your actions were noticed by the staff, by visitors, and even by our guest. Your calm and discipline showed true courage." Noor inclined her head politely. "Thank you, sir. I only did my duty. That is all a guard can do." Rashid nodded. "Yes, and that is why your actions are so important. Courage is not always loud. Sometimes it is quiet and steady, and that is often more powerful than any action or weapon." As the day progressed, more visitors came and went. Noor observed each one carefully, noting details, reading expressions, and remaining alert. Her mind was focused, her senses sharp. Even small movements, unusual expressions, or unusual behavior were noticed immediately. This was the result of years of training and practice. She understood that being a royal guard was not only about standing at the gate, but also about understanding and responding appropriately to every situation. The foreign officer, while walking through the embassy corridors, observed Noor from a distance. He noticed her stillness and focus and felt a deep respect for her professionalism. He realized that she had not only protected the embassy physically, but had also preserved its honor through her discipline. He understood now that true authority was not about giving orders, but about earning respect through integrity and dedication. As the afternoon approached, Noor remained at her post, her presence steady and commanding. People passing by could not help but notice her poise and calm. The following day, the embassy was quieter than usual. Noor arrived at her post early, as always, her uniform neat, her shoes polished, and her posture perfect. Standing at the main gate, she observed the world around her with careful attention. Every visitor who approached was met with her steady gaze, her calm presence creating a sense of order and respect. For Noor, her duty was never just a job. It was a responsibility to uphold the honor of the royal family and the embassy itself. Inside the embassy, the staff were still talking about the foreign officer and his encounter with Noor. Many of them had witnessed the event directly, and others had heard about it through colleagues. They admired Noor not only for her courage but for her discipline, her calmness, and her respect. Her actions had set an example of what it meant to be a royal guard, and everyone in the embassy felt proud. Rashid, the head of security, walked through the hallways, checking on the staff and ensuring that everything ran smoothly. He noticed a group of young recruits gathered near the training room. They were whispering, their eyes wide and their faces full of admiration. Rashid approached them and spoke calmly. "Do you know why Noor's actions yesterday were important?" he asked. One of the recruits, a young man named Samir, spoke up. She didn't move even when the officer shouted at her. She stayed calm. She didn't seem afraid at all. Rashid nodded. "Exactly. Courage is not always about action or confrontation. Sometimes it is about standing quietly and following the rules with respect. Noor has shown that respect and discipline are more powerful than fear or anger. You should all remember that lesson." The recruits listened carefully. They realized that Noor's example was not just about following orders, but about understanding the meaning behind every action. Discipline, they learned, was not blind obedience. It was knowing the right thing to do and doing it even when it was difficult. Meanwhile, Noor continued her watch at the gate. The streets outside were gradually filling with people and vehicles. Visitors came and went, each one noticed carefully. Noor did not speak unnecessarily, but her calm presence communicated authority and respect. A few regular visitors smiled politely at her, showing their acknowledgement of her professionalism. She returned their gestures with quiet respect, but her focus never wavered. Later, Rashid returned to Noor's post to check on her. "You handled the situation yesterday very well," he said quietly. "Your actions have inspired everyone in the embassy. Your calmness and discipline have shown the true meaning of courage." Noor inclined her head respectfully. "Thank you, sir. I only did my duty." "That is all a guard should do," Rashid smiled. "That is exactly why you are admired. Doing your duty well is more important than anything else. Courage is not always loud. Sometimes it is quiet and steady, and that is often stronger than any weapon or command." As the day went on, more visitors approached the embassy. Some had heard stories about Noor and wanted to see the famous guard in action. She noticed them immediately, observing every detail, from the way they walked to the way they carried themselves. Her calm and steady presence left a lasting impression on each visitor, even if they did not fully understand why. Inside the embassy, the foreign officer's visit continued, but he could not stop thinking about Noor. He realized that authority alone was not enough to earn respect. True respect came from integrity, discipline, and courage. Noor had demonstrated all of these qualities without raising her voice or showing anger. Her actions had left a strong impression, and he could not forget the lesson she had taught him. By the afternoon, Noor had become a quiet inspiration for everyone in the embassy. Staff members who had never spoken to her directly began to notice her presence. They understood that her strength came not from force but from her calm determination and her adherence to principles. She had shown that discipline and respect were more important than any argument or command. A young visitor approached the gate, curious about the guard who had impressed so many. He watched Noor for a few moments and then asked softly, "Were you ever scared when the officer shouted at you?" Noor smiled slightly, her eyes calm and steady. "Fear is natural," she replied. "But duty is stronger than fear. When you know what is right, fear becomes a tool, not a barrier." The visitor nodded thoughtfully, understanding the lesson. He walked away, carrying the story with him. Noor returned her attention to the gate, scanning for the next visitor, her presence steady, calm, and unshakable. As the day came to an end, Noor realized something important. True courage was not always loud or dramatic. It could be quiet, steady, and principled. And sometimes a single act of discipline and respect could inspire everyone around. Her actions had reminded the staff, the visitors, and even the foreign officer that integrity, patience, and courage were qualities that could never be commanded. They had to be understood and practiced. By standing firmly at her post, Noor had shown that she was not only a guard, but also a symbol of discipline, honor, and courage. Everyone in the embassy remembered her that day, knowing that her example would guide them for years to come. The following morning, the embassy seemed to carry a quiet pride. Noor arrived at her post before the sun fully rose. Her uniform was spotless, her shoes polished, and her stance perfect. She checked her equipment methodically, then returned to her position at the gate. Her eyes scanned the streets, watching each passerby, each visitor, and each small detail. To Noor, vigilance was not just a rule. It was a principle she lived by every day. Inside the embassy, the staff were quietly talking about the impact Noor had made. Her actions the previous day had spread quickly. Many whispered among themselves about how a single guard had shown courage without raising her voice, how she had maintained respect while standing firm, and how her discipline had left an impression even on a foreign officer. For many of the staff, Noor had become more than a guard. She was now a symbol of patience, focus, and courage in action. The head of security, Rashid, moved through the corridors, checking on the staff and ensuring that everything was running smoothly. He noticed young recruits gathered in a small training room, their eyes wide with curiosity. He approached them quietly. "Do you remember what happened yesterday at the gate?" he asked. "Yes, sir," one of the recruits, Layla, said. Noor didn't move even when the officer shouted. She stayed calm. "I've never seen anyone like that," Rashid nodded. "That is exactly why her actions are important. Courage is not always about being loud or taking action in a dramatic way. Sometimes courage is quiet. It is about following the rules and principles even when it is difficult." Noor showed that true strength comes from discipline, not force. Remember her example and try to learn from it. Meanwhile, Noor remained at her post, scanning every visitor with calm attention. She noticed a small group of tourists approaching the embassy, their cameras ready to capture the gates and the guards. Noor observed their movements carefully. She did not speak unnecessarily, but her steady presence conveyed authority and respect. The tourists paused briefly, impressed by her focus, and then continued on their path. Noor returned her attention to the street, aware that every detail mattered. Inside the embassy, the foreign officer continued his meetings, but his mind kept returning to Noor. He could not stop thinking about the young guard who had refused his command in such a calm and respectful way. He had realized that her actions were not disobedience but courage guided by discipline. Authority alone was not enough to earn respect. Noor had shown him that integrity, focus, and courage could leave a much stronger impression than words or commands. Later, Rashid approached Noor quietly, observing her calm vigilance. "You have done well," he said. "Your actions have inspired everyone here. You have shown that patience, discipline, and focus are stronger than fear or pressure. People are noticing, and they are learning from your example." Noor inclined her head politely. "Thank you, sir. I only do my duty. That is all a guard should do," Rashid smiled. "That is exactly why everyone admires you. Duty performed with integrity and respect is more powerful than any command or authority. You have taught everyone an important lesson without even raising your voice." As the day went on, more visitors arrived at the embassy. Some were regular visitors who had seen Noor before, and some were new, curious about the famous guard. Every person who approached was watched carefully, their movements noticed and analyzed. Noor's calm presence created a sense of order and respect. Even without speaking, she communicated that the embassy was a place where discipline and honor mattered. The foreign officer, during a brief break in his meetings, walked near the gate and observed Noor from a distance. He noticed her posture, the way her eyes scanned every detail, and the quiet focus she maintained. He felt a deep respect for her professionalism. She had not only protected the embassy physically, but she had also preserved its honor through her calm and disciplined actions. He realized that this young guard had taught him a lesson in leadership and respect that he would never forget. By late afternoon, Noor had completed her shift, yet she remained calm, alert, and steady throughout the day. Visitors left the embassy with a sense of admiration for the guards and especially for Noor. Staff members who had only seen her from afar now understood her value. Her discipline, courage, and patience were quality. The next morning, the embassy was alive with activity. Visitors arrived from different parts of the city, officials came for meetings, and staff moved quickly through the halls. Yet at the main gate, Noor stood like always, calm, attentive, and perfectly still. Her eyes scanned every visitor, her posture straight and her movements precise. Her presence alone communicated discipline, professionalism, and respect. People passing by could not help but notice her steady gaze and the quiet confidence she carried. Noor's reputation had grown since the foreign officer's visit. Staff talked about her in hushed tones. Young recruits studied her example, and visitors admired her focus. She had become a symbol of discipline and courage within the embassy, a reminder that true strength was not loud or aggressive, but quiet, steady, and principled. Even the regular visitors who passed by daily had begun to recognize her. They offered polite nods or soft smiles acknowledging her presence, while Noor returned the gestures with the same calm respect she always displayed. Inside the embassy, the foreign officer had completed his meetings, but he could not forget Noor. He had spent hours reflecting on her behavior, realizing that authority alone was not enough to earn respect. Noor had shown him that respect came from integrity, courage, and discipline. She had made him reconsider the way he understood leadership. Even in a foreign country, he had learned an important lesson about honor, patience, and strength. Rashid, the head of security, walked past Noor's post, observing her quietly. He had seen many guards over the years, but Noor's combination of discipline and courage was exceptional. He approached her softly. "Your actions have inspired everyone here," he said. "Your calm presence and steady focus have shown what it truly means to be a royal guard. You are a living example of discipline, courage, and respect." Noor inclined her head politely. "Thank you, sir. I only do my duty. That is the responsibility of every guard." Rashid smiled. "Yes, but you have gone beyond the expectations of duty. You have taught everyone a lesson without even speaking loudly. Your courage has left a lasting impression." The day continued and more visitors arrived at the embassy. Some had heard of Noor's actions and were curious to see her for themselves. They approached the gate cautiously, observing her from a distance. Noor noticed every detail, the way they walked, the expressions on their faces, the small gestures of respect or curiosity. Her attention to detail, combined with her calm presence, made every visitor feel the importance of discipline and professionalism. Among the visitors that day was a young journalist who had heard the story of the royal guard who had stood firm against a foreign officer. She quietly took notes as she observed Noor, careful not to distract her. She was impressed by the guard's stillness, her focus, and the quiet strength that radiated from her presence. "This is remarkable," the journalist whispered to her colleague. "I have never seen anyone handle responsibility with such quiet courage." Later, the foreign officer returned to the embassy to formally conclude his visit. He walked past the gate and paused when he saw Noor. Her posture was perfect, her gaze calm, and her presence steady. He could feel the quiet authority she held, not through words or actions, but through discipline and focus. He approached Rashid and quietly said, "This guard has taught me more about respect and courage than I could have imagined." "She is remarkable," Rashid nodded. "Yes, she is. Noor's strength comes from her training, her discipline, and her understanding of duty. She shows that courage does not need to be loud. It can be quiet, steady, and principled. She has earned respect from everyone here, including you." The officer took a moment to study Noor. He realized that her actions were not about defiance or pride. They were about integrity, honor, and discipline. He silently acknowledged that her courage had changed his perspective and that he would carry the lesson with him long after leaving the embassy. As the day came to a close, Noor remained at her post, calm and focused. She had observed countless visitors, handled her duties with care, and maintained the honor of the embassy. People passing by had noticed her professionalism, and many had left with a quiet admiration for the young guard who had shown such discipline. Noor understood that her courage was not about recognition or praise. It was about doing her duty, standing by her principles, and showing respect through action. The quiet strength she demonstrated was more powerful than any command or shout, and it left a lasting impression on everyone who witnessed it. By the evening, the embassy had returned to its usual calm. Noor had completed another full day at her post, yet her presence continued to inspire those around her. Staff, visitors, and even the foreign officer carried the memory of her quiet courage with them. Her example had become a lesson in integrity, discipline, and respect that would be remembered long after the events of the day. Noor stood at the gate, her eyes calm, her posture perfect, and her mind focused. The world moved around her, but she remained steady. In her quiet determination, she had shown that true courage and respect were not measured by force or words, but by discipline, honor, and unwavering focus. The sun was beginning to set over the city as Noor remained at her post. Her uniform reflected the fading light. Her posture was perfect, and her eyes scanned the street with the same calm focus she had maintained all day. The embassy had been busy, visitors and officials coming and going, yet Noor had remained steady, observing every detail and protecting the honor of the royal house. Her presence was quiet but powerful, a reminder to everyone that discipline and courage could speak louder than words. Inside the embassy, staff were beginning to wrap up their work for the day. The story of Noor's courage had spread further than ever before. Recruits were inspired, staff members were proud, and even visitors who had seen her earlier returned with admiration for the young guard. Rashid, the head of security, walked through the halls with a quiet smile, knowing that Noor's example had left a lasting impression. He entered the small office where a few senior staff were discussing the day. "Noor has shown everyone what it truly means to serve with honor," Rashid said. "She has proven that courage does not need to be loud or dramatic. It can be quiet, steady, and principled. Her actions have inspired us all, and her example will guide us for years to come." The staff nodded in agreement. One of the young recruits, Amira, spoke softly. "I hope I can be as disciplined and calm as Noor one day. Watching her today, I realized that true courage is about control and respect, not just strength." Rashid smiled. "Yes, Amira. Discipline and respect are the foundation of courage. Noor has shown that in the strongest way possible." Outside, the streets were quieter now. Visitors were leaving, cars were moving steadily, and the city seemed to be winding down. Noor continued her watch, her eyes sharp, her mind alert. She understood that every moment mattered, and even when the crowd was gone, her duty continued. Being a royal guard was not just about standing at the gate. It was about protecting the principles, the honor, and the people she served. At that moment, the foreign officer approached the gate one last time. He had come to formally conclude his visit and wanted to personally acknowledge Noor. When he saw her standing calm and steady, he paused. Her posture, her focus, and her quiet strength made a deep impression on him once again. He walked closer and spoke softly. "Guard, your actions have left a strong impression on me. I have learned an important lesson about courage, respect, and leadership from you. You have shown that true strength is not in commands or authority, but in discipline, patience, and integrity." Noor turned to him politely and inclined her head. "Thank you, sir. I only follow my duty. That is all a guard should do." The officer nodded, clearly moved. "Your discipline has taught me more than I could have imagined. I will carry this lesson with me always." Rashid, standing nearby, smiled quietly. He had seen many officers and visitors over the years, but few had left as respectful and thoughtful a response as this one. Noor's actions had not only protected the embassy, but had also inspired even those from outside to understand the importance of courage, respect, and discipline. As the officer departed, Noor returned her attention to the street. She remained vigilant, her eyes scanning every movement, her presence calm and steady. The city around her continued to move, busy and loud, but Noor stood firm, a symbol of order, honor, and discipline amidst the chaos. Staff members passing by the gate paused to watch her for a moment, silently acknowledging her strength and focus. Even without words, Noor's calm courage communicated respect, patience, and unwavering dedication. She had become an example for everyone, showing that bravery and honor were not measured by actions alone, but by consistency, principle, and self-control. As the evening settled fully, Noor finally allowed herself a small moment to adjust her stance, though her focus never left her post. The gates of the embassy were secure, the visitors were respectful, and the lessons of the day were clear to everyone who had witnessed them. Courage was quiet. Discipline was powerful. Respect was earned through integrity and consistency. Noor knew that her actions, though simple and quiet, had made a difference. She had inspired her colleagues, impressed visitors, and even left a lasting impression on a foreign officer. Her calm courage had taught a lesson that words could not fully capture. It